I found two babies on the road and adopted them. But 25 years later, their real parents came. I still remember that night vividly, the cold wind biting at my cheeks, the rain soaking my coat, and the soft cries that drew me to the side of the deserted street. Two infants wrapped in thin blankets, lying helplessly in the shadows. My heart ached instantly. I could not leave them there. Something in me, something deep and instinctive, told me that they needed me, that I had to act. No matter what the world thought, I carried them to my car, the wailing muffled only by my coat, feeling their tiny hands clutching at my fingers. I didn't have children at the time. My own son was grown and distant, and my life had been quiet, predictable. But in that moment, a new purpose surged through me. These two tiny lives depended on me. I became their father that night, not by law, not by blood, but by choice. Raising them was never easy. Nights filled with cries, diapers, and endless worry became the foundation of my days. But over time, their laughter replaced the cries, and their tiny fingers curling around mine replaced the fear with an unbreakable bond. They grew quickly: first steps, first words, first days at school. Every milestone was a triumph. Every scrape or fever, a heartbreak shared between us. I poured my life into them quietly, without expecting anything in return, only knowing that they were mine to love. Over the years, people often asked about their origin. I gave them only what I knew, the truth as it had been told to me, that they were abandoned, that they were meant to find their way into my care. They never questioned it. Perhaps because they trusted me completely, or perhaps because love has a way of silencing doubts when it is strong enough. Even as they grew into adults, their personalities blossomed in ways that amazed me. The girl, fiercely intelligent and independent, always protective of her brother. The boy, kind-hearted, mischievous, and always ready to make me laugh even when life was hard. They were not just children I had saved. They had become the center of my world. My heart, once solitary, now beat in rhythm with theirs. And yet, life is never predictable. Just as I had given them everything, life prepared a storm I could not have foreseen. 25 years of love and quiet devotion could not shield us from the past that waited patiently to reveal itself. It came quietly at first: a letter, a phone call, a vague inquiry, but quickly escalated into a presence. I could not ignore that their real parents had found us. Not by accident, not by kindness, but because time has a way of resurfacing truths that were buried, no matter how deep. I sat at my kitchen table that morning, staring at the envelope, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sudden weight of responsibility. I had raised these children as my own, loved them with every ounce of my being. But now I had to confront a reality that could rip that world apart in an instant. As I opened the envelope, my eyes scanned the words, my heart racing. The message was simple, yet it carried a weight impossible to measure. They wanted their children back. They wanted to meet them, to reclaim what they believed was theirs. I could feel my chest tighten, my mind racing with questions I had no answers for. How could I protect the life we had built together? How could I face them, knowing that the love I had given might be dismissed because of blood? The sound of the doorbell echoed through the quiet house, cutting through my thoughts. My pulse quickened. Standing on the doorstep were two people, well-dressed, confident, and unmistakably the parents I had never met. Their eyes scanned the living room with subtle expectation, as though they had walked into a place they owned by right. Not realizing that the lives within these walls had been shaped by 25 years of care, sacrifice, and unwavering love, I stepped toward the door. My expression calm, my hands steady, my mind clear despite the storm raging inside. They had come for the children I loved. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: love is not measured by DNA. It is measured by heart, by presence, by every quiet moment that shapes a life. and I had given them that in abundance. That the first hours after their arrival were surreal. My heart pounded, but I remained outwardly calm. I welcomed them in, offered tea, tried to make polite conversation, but every word felt loaded. Their presence carried an unspoken claim, a quiet assertion that these children were rightfully theirs. I watched closely as my daughter and son, the two I had raised from infancy, reacted with confusion, curiosity, and a flicker of hesitation. My daughter, always fiercely protective, kept close to her brother. Her brow furrowed slightly, her eyes darting between the strangers and me. She asked questions quietly, her voice hesitant. Who are you?" The strangers smiled politely, replying with practiced warmth, yet their eyes betrayed expectation and entitlement. My son, usually confident and easygoing, seemed uncertain for the first time in his life. He shifted from foot to foot, glancing at me for guidance, as though seeking reassurance. I observed them carefully, knowing that the true test of love is not the arrival of the past, but how the present responds. 25 years had forged unbreakable bonds. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every birthday candle blown had built a fortress around their hearts, and I had been the architect. Now strangers claimed ownership by virtue of biology, but biology alone cannot replace decades of presence, care, and sacrifice. The conversation became more pointed as questions grew sharper. They asked about childhood memories, first steps, birthdays, and family traditions. My children answered cautiously, uncertain how to reconcile memories of love and safety with the faces of strangers claiming them. Their parents' eyes never left mine. A quiet challenge lingered in the air. They were polite, but their tone carried subtle judgment, as though 25 years of parenting could be invalidated by their arrival. I felt a quiet anger rise, but I tempered it with calm. I could not let emotion cloud judgment. Love is measured by actions, not words. And in these walls, every action I had taken, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every lesson, every hug stood as a testament. They could not erase it with polite smiles or carefully chosen words. Hours passed, and the atmosphere thickened. The strangers grew slightly impatient. Their attempts to connect with the children are awkward, clumsy, and unfamiliar. They did not know the subtle rhythms of their personalities, the way my daughter tilted her head when thinking, the way my son's laugh could brighten the dullest day. The little gestures and habits formed over decades. They had claimed them by birth, but they had no claim to the lives shaped by love. That my children began asking more pointed questions, searching for answers in a world suddenly complicated by the presence of these outsiders. My daughter, usually composed, struggled to contain her confusion and frustration. My son's playful nature was replaced with hesitation, uncertainty, and silent questions about loyalty, love, and belonging. The strangers tried to impress, attempting small gifts, casual stories, and reminders of their heritage. But the walls built by years of care were already in place. Late afternoon arrived, bringing a tense calm. I watched quietly as my children retreated to a room to talk privately, the strangers lingering awkwardly in the living room. I could hear fragments of their discussion, the confusion, the fear, the faint traces of loyalty to the life they had always known. It was a delicate balance. One wrong word could sway them, but deepen their hearts. They carried the love and guidance I had poured into their lives. I poured tea into 3 cups, carrying them gently to the living room, my movements deliberate, steady. Each step, each gesture was measured, calm, asserting not dominance through force, but presence through quiet authority. I placed a cup in front of the strangers, then one for each of my children, and finally one for myself. Silence enveloped the room. Words were unnecessary. The weight of shared history, of love, of protection, hung in the air more heavily than any argument could. Evening approached, casting long shadows across the room. The strangers grew restless, subtle impatience flickering across their faces. My children were uncertain, torn between biological ties and the only family they had ever known. I stayed calm, watching, letting the tension stretch naturally. Every glance, every pause, every hesitant movement mattered. They were beginning to understand slowly that parentage is not only about blood, but about decades of love, care, and unwavering presence. And through it all, I realized something profound. The strongest bonds are forged not in the moment of origin, but in the day-to-day acts of devotion, the quiet sacrifices, the shared laughter and tears that build lives together. These strangers had found us, but they could never erase 25 years of love, nor the family we had already become. As night fell, the weight of the day pressed on everyone. The strangers' polite smiles now carried unease. My children, exhausted by the emotional whirlwind, looked toward me with a mix of trust and question. I met their eyes, calmly, reassuringly, knowing that whatever happened next, the life we had built together would not be undone by the mere appearance of the past. The following morning, the tension in the house was almost unbearable. My children awoke with quiet apprehension, their movements careful, their expressions heavy with doubt. I observed them silently from the kitchen, sipping my coffee, letting them feel the weight of the stranger's presence without interference. It was subtle, but every glance, every gesture, every unspoken thought carried meaning. They were caught between two worlds, the life they had always known and the sudden intrusion of their biological parents. The strangers tried again to connect. More forceful this time, asking questions with a tone that hinted at authority, subtly reminding my children of what they belonged to by birth. But my children were not easily swayed. My daughter, sharp and independent, countered politely, carefully balancing respect for the strangers while remaining loyal to the home that had nurtured her. My son, once mischievous and carefree, now exhibited hesitance, struggling to reconcile love with newfound confusion. Their eyes occasionally flicked toward me, silently seeking assurance, trust, or guidance. I met their gazes calmly, affirming silently that our family had been built through decades of devotion, not merely by blood. The strangers, sensing resistance, grew frustrated. Their politeness slipped into subtle irritation, a tension that permeated the room. They gestured more, spoke more insistently, and even attempted to reminisce about events they claimed had happened when the children were infants, events I had no memory of, and which my children had no recollection of either. The awkward contradictions became more apparent with every statement, revealing that years apart had created gaps that no claim of parentage could fill. By mid-morning, the emotional strain began to affect the children physically. My daughter's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her cup of tea, her lips pressed tightly together. My son's voice wavered when he attempted to answer questions, revealing the inner conflict tearing at him. I stayed calm, letting the room's silence punctuate their uncertainty. I didn't need to speak. The weight of years of shared life, love, and care carried authority stronger than any argument. The strangers finally asked to see personal items, baby photos, school achievements, keepsakes. My children hesitated, unsure how much to share, uncertain whether to honor these people or to protect the life they had always known. I quietly observed their hesitation, recognizing it as a sign of loyalty and love. They were beginning to understand that life is not defined solely by origins, but by the care, guidance, and sacrifices that shape who we become. As afternoon approached, the atmosphere became tense with unspoken conflict. The strangers, frustrated by the lack of compliance, tried subtle manipulation, reminding my children of their true heritage, emphasizing rights, claiming authority over decisions. But my children, bolstered by the love and guidance of 25 years, quietly resisted. My daughter's posture straightened, my son's eyes grew firmer. They were beginning to assert the truth they had lived, the bonds they had cherished, and the home that had nurtured them. I intervened gently, not with anger, but with calm authority. These children, I said softly, are not defined only by blood. They are defined by the life we built together, by the love that shaped them, by the years of guidance and care. My words were steady, unwavering. The strangers flinched slightly, realizing that I was not a passive observer, but a protector of what truly mattered. Evening crept in, casting long shadows across the living room. The children had retreated to their room to talk privately again, whispering, debating, struggling to reconcile feelings of love, loyalty, and identity. I could hear the occasional murmur, the pause of thought, the subtle sigh of realization. Slowly, they were beginning to understand that the past could not undo the life they had known. The father who had loved them unconditionally, or the family they had become. By nightfall, the strangers were visibly frustrated, their smiles now forced, their confident demeanor replaced by uncertainty. They had attempted to claim ownership, to assert rights, to disrupt lives built on love. But they had underestimated one thing: the strength of bonds forged over decades, the quiet authority of presence, and the moral weight of true parenting. I sat in my chair, the soft glow of the evening light falling across the room. I observed my children through the doorway, their expressions slowly shifting from doubt to recognition. They were beginning to make sense of the whirlwind of the day. That love, loyalty, and care cannot be replaced, cannot be erased, and cannot be commanded simply because of biology. And in that quiet moment, I realized something profound. The strongest parents are not always the ones who gave life, but those who nurture it, protect it, and remain present through every hardship, every triumph, and every ordinary day that shapes extraordinary lives. The next morning, the tension in the house had thickened almost to a tangible weight. My children awoke with unease, each movement hesitant, their faces a mixture of confusion, fear, and curiosity. I observed them silently, feeling the years of love and patience coalescing into a moment of reckoning. They were caught between two realities: the family they had always known and the sudden intrusion of their biological parents. Yet, even in their uncertainty, the bond we had forged over 25 years remained unbroken. The strangers attempted to engage again, speaking politely yet insistently, trying to assert authority through reminders of biology, legal rights, and the past. My daughter's protective instincts flared immediately. She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly, her gaze firm yet questioning. My son's playful, carefree demeanor had vanished, replaced by thoughtful hesitation. I remained calm, letting the exchanges unfold naturally, observing the subtleties in my children's reactions. Their loyalty to our life together was quiet, but unmistakable. As the day progressed, the intensity escalated. The strangers tried more personal appeals, bringing out old photos, recalling moments they claimed were theirs to share. Yet, each attempt only highlighted the stark difference between the years of care I had provided and the brief interruptions of absence they now represented. I watched my children, noting the subtle gestures, the protective glance between them, the small reassuring touch, the way their eyes occasionally flickered toward me for support. They were beginning to understand that family is defined not by origin alone, but by love, presence, and unwavering devotion. Afternoon shadows fell across the room, stretching long and dramatic through the windows. The strangers, sensing resistance, grew tense, their polite smiles now tight, controlled. They had expected compliance, obedience, and deference, but they had underestimated the power of decades of nurturing and moral authority. My children had grown strong, capable, and wise because of the love and guidance I had provided. Not simply the bloodline they now claimed. I finally spoke. Deliberately, calmly, my voice steady and resolute. "You have found them, yes," I said. "But they have been raised with care, with love, with attention to every moment of their lives. You cannot undo 25 years of devotion simply by claiming a right that exists on paper, but not in the heart." My words echoed through the room, carrying the weight of time, patience, and quiet authority. The strangers faltered, their confident composure cracking as they realized the truth. The children before them were not defined solely by their presence, but by a lifetime of love, guidance, and sacrifice. My daughter's eyes softened as she turned to me, understanding the depth of my role in shaping the life she had always trusted. My son nodded slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing. A quiet affirmation that the father who had raised them mattered more than strangers with claims of origin. Evening settled over the house. The soft glow of the sunset cast in warm light across the room. The strangers had grown silent, their attempts to assert authority fading into unease. My children had retreated to their rooms briefly, seeking to process the whirlwind of emotions. But they returned with clarity in their eyes, a renewed sense of belonging, a recognition that love and loyalty are earned through years of care, not granted through birthright alone. I sat back, letting the house breathe in the calm that followed. The tension had dissolved, not with confrontation, but through the quiet authority of presence and the undeniable weight of decades of love. My children came to me then, standing close, their expressions a mixture of relief, gratitude, and quiet triumph. I embraced them, holding them as I had for countless years, feeling the depth of our bond reinforced in the face of disruption. And in that embrace, a profound truth settled in my heart. The strongest foundation for a family is not the accident of birth, but the deliberate, unwavering devotion to nurture, protect, and guide. The strangers had arrived, hoping to reclaim what they believed was theirs. But they could not undo the life we had built together, the lessons taught, or the love that had grown beyond measure. The house fell into quiet again, but it was no longer tense. It was filled with a silent, unshakable reassurance that family is not merely given, it is created, it is earned, and it is defended with the heart. My children had seen the truth. They had lived it. And I, their father by choice and love, had finally witnessed the resolution of a chapter that could have torn us apart, now firmly closed with understanding, loyalty, and enduring affection.